What you call awakening might be nothing more than a more refined illusion. There's an idea that has quietly spread through the spiritual world, almost like an unquestionable truth. Just be the observer. It sounds simple, elegant, almost impossible to be wrong. You step back from thoughts, emotions, automatic reactions, and take on a position that feels higher, clearer, as if you've finally found a safe place within yourself, somewhere untouched by the chaos. But there's a problem almost no one notices, and it's deeply unsettling. That place you believe you've reached might not be real. Because every time you say, "I am observing," there is still an I there. And that small detail changes everything. What feels like spiritual progress may just be a subtle shift in identity. Before, you were the character lost in the story, reacting, suffering, tangled in thoughts. Now, you feel like the one watching the character. More distant, more silent, seemingly free. But that distance can be deceptive, because the observer itself may just be another construction. What if what you call awareness is still part of the mind? What if that sense of being above it all is simply the ego taking on a more sophisticated, harder to detect form? The most dangerous place is not being trapped in the mind. The most dangerous place is believing you've gone beyond it, when you've only changed positions within the same game. And this is where the real questioning begins. Welcome to the channel Inner Gaze, a space for stillness, deep inquiry, and inner clarity. Here, each reflection invites you to look beyond appearances and question what feels certain. In today's video, you'll explore the illusion of being the observer, how the ego can hide within that position, and why even the witness itself can be seen. We'll move through subtle insights inspired by Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta Maharaj, going beyond common ideas about awareness. Make yourself comfortable, stay present, and allow this journey to reveal something that may have always been overlooked. At some point along the journey, something begins to feel different, almost like relief. You realize you don't have to be entangled in every thought, every emotion that arises. Instead of reacting, you watch. Instead of getting lost, you observe. And this creates a new kind of experience, lighter, quieter, as if there's space between you and everything that happens. This practice feels liberating, and at a certain level, it truly is. But there is something hidden within it that is rarely questioned. Something so subtle that even those who believe they are deeply aware often miss it completely. When you observe a thought, there is you, and there is the thought. When you observe an emotion, there is you, and there is the emotion. When you observe the mind, there is still someone there, occupying the position of the observer. And this maintains an invisible structure, a silent division between the one who sees and what is being seen. That division is called duality, and as long as it remains, separation remains. This is where the teaching of Ramana Maharshi becomes precise, almost surgical. He does not simply tell you to observe, he points your attention to something far more direct and far more unsettling. Who is the observer? Not as an intellectual question, but as a living inquiry, something that cuts through the experience itself. Because when this question is taken seriously, something begins to break down. The observer, which once felt so solid, starts to lose its certainty. You try to find it, but you only encounter more thoughts. You try to feel it, but what you find are sensations that are also being noticed. And then a kind of tension appears. If everything can be observed, who exactly is the one observing? And more importantly, does that someone truly exist the way you assume it does? This is the point where the idea of just observing begins to reveal its limits. Because maybe you haven't gone far enough yet. This is where things become dangerously subtle, because the ego is not as simple as it first appears. It doesn't just disappear when you become more aware. It adapts. It reshapes itself. It learns the language of spirituality and then hides inside it. At first, the identity is obvious. I am the body. Then it becomes more refined. I am the mind. And eventually, it evolves into something that feels almost untouchable. I am the one who is aware of everything. And this is where most people stop, because this position feels elevated. It feels peaceful. It feels like freedom. You are no longer reacting the same way. You are no longer completely lost in thoughts. There is distance now, a sense of space, as if you've stepped out of the chaos and into clarity. But look closely. There is still an I there. Subtle, quiet, almost invisible, but still present. The ego has not disappeared. It has transformed into something more sophisticated. Now it no longer says, I am suffering. Now it says, I am the witness of suffering. And that sounds wise. It sounds awakened, but it is still a position. And anything that can be claimed as a position is still part of the structure of identity. This is the hidden trap of the spiritual path. Not ignorance, but premature certainty. Because once you identify as the observer, questioning often stops. You believe you've reached the end. You believe you've found truth. But what if this is only a more refined illusion? The teachings associated with Ramana Maharshi quietly point to this danger. They reveal that even the sense of being the witness can be constructed. Because if you can say, I am the observer, that statement itself is appearing in awareness.
For most of your life, you believed you were your thoughts. You believed the mind had to be fixed, silenced, controlled. But no one ever told you this. The mind was never the problem. The real trap is believing you are it. There is something in you that watches fear, that watches pain, that watches every thought arise and disappear. That observer has never suffered. It was never born, and it will never die. When this is seen, effort disappears. The spiritual search ends, because the one who was searching was never real. This is not a teaching to believe in. It is a direct experience, simple and deeply liberating. The book, The Awakening of the Observer, does not teach techniques. It points to the exact place where the ego dissolves. Each page is a mirror, and what is seen there cannot be unseen. If something in you recognizes these words, the call has already begun. Click the link in the comments and get your copy of The Awakening of the Observer now.
Which means it is known, which means it is perceived. And anything that is perceived cannot be what you truly are. So now the ground begins to shake, because the one you thought was real, the one you believed had stepped beyond everything, might still be part of the same illusion, just harder to detect. And this is where the path becomes uncomfortable, because it is no longer about improving the self. It is no longer about becoming more aware. It is about seeing that even the most subtle sense of I may not be real at all. Up to this point, there was still something you could hold on to. Even if everything else was questioned, there was still the sense of being the observer, the silent presence watching everything unfold. It felt stable, reliable, almost like the final ground. But this is exactly where the teaching associated with Ramana Maharshi becomes uncompromising, because what he points to is not a refined observer. It is not a higher version of you. It is not a more peaceful identity. He cuts deeper. He reveals that the self is not the witness. At first, this sounds confusing, almost contradictory, because the idea of the witness feels so close to truth. It feels pure, detached, untouched. But look more carefully. For there to be a witness, something must be witnessed. There must be an object, something appearing, something being known. And the moment there is an object, there is separation, a division between subject and object, between the one who sees and what is seen. This is duality. And according to this deeper insight, the real cannot be divided. it cannot stand apart from something else. So the witness, as a position, already implies separation, which means it cannot be the absolute. This is where the structure begins to collapse, because what you took to be the most subtle truth is revealed as another layer of perception, something that appears, something that can be noticed. And if it can be noticed, it cannot be what you are. So even the sense of, I am the observer, becomes questionable. It is no longer solid. It no longer feels like a final answer. It becomes just another experience arising. And this is deeply disorienting, because the mind is always searching for a position, something to hold, something to claim, something to be. But here, even the last position is taken away. There is no higher self to become, no final identity to stabilize in, only the falling away of everything that can be pointed to. And what remains cannot be described as someone observing. It cannot be framed as awareness looking at objects, because there is no distance, no separation, no two. The language of witnessing was only a temporary pointer, a tool to step out of identification with thoughts, but it was never meant to be the final truth. And if you stop there, you remain in a subtle illusion. So now the question becomes even more radical. If the witness is not what you are, if even that is seen, then what remains when there is no observer left to stand apart? This is where the final layer begins to dissolve. What was once subtle now becomes undeniable, because the insight doesn't stop at questioning the observer. It goes further. It removes even the last refuge the mind tries to hold. The teachings of Nisargadatta Maharaj push this to the edge, not by adding something new, but by taking everything away. At first, there is a recognition. You are not the body. You are not the mind. Then, something deeper appears, a sense of simple presence, the feeling of I am. And for a moment, this feels like truth itself, pure being, silent, unshaken. But even this does not remain untouched. Because if that sense of I am can be noticed, if it can be experienced, then it is also appearing, and anything that appears disappears. This is the turning point, because now, even the witness, even the one who seemed to stand behind everything, is no longer safe. It too is seen. It arises. It is known. And therefore, it cannot be what you are. So what happens now? There is no place left to stand, no identity left to claim. The structure collapses completely, because every layer that once felt like me has been exposed as something perceived. The body, seen. The thoughts, seen. The observer, seen. Even the silent sense of being seen. And if all of that is seen, what remains? Not something you can point to, not something you can describe, because anything you describe would already be an object. And this is the radical clarity. If it can be known, felt, observed, or experienced, it is not what you are. So the witness falls, not as a loss, but as a revelation. Because what remains was never a position, never an identity. It was never something you could become, and that is why it cannot be found, only recognized when everything false disappears. And in that moment, there is no observer left to say anything at all. And now, there is nowhere left to stand. Every position that once felt real has quietly fallen away. The body was seen. The mind was seen. The observer was seen. Even the silent sense of I am was seen. So what is left when nothing can be held? The mind looks for an answer. It tries to rebuild something, anything that it can understand, define, or grasp. But every attempt turns into another object, another thought, another appearance, and all of it is seen. So there is no conclusion to arrive at, no final concept to adopt, no higher identity waiting to be claimed. Because what remains was never a position. It cannot be practiced. It cannot be maintained. It cannot be lost. It does not depend on attention. It does not depend on effort. It simply is, without needing to be named. This is not something you become. It is what remains when everything false is no longer believed. And in this, there is no observer, no observed, no active observing, no distance, no separation, only what is, without a center to claim it. And that is why it cannot be explained, because explanation requires someone to understand. But here, there is no one left to hold on to anything at all. If something in this video truly resonated with your heart or brought you a sense of clarity, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing this video with someone close to you who might also be searching for answers. And don't go yet. Make sure to watch the next video appearing on your end screen, because it builds on what you just saw and can deepen your awareness even more. If you want to explore this path more deeply, the book The Awakening of the Observer offers a much deeper understanding, along with practical exercises for your daily life. The link is in the pinned comment. And if this video made a difference for you, you can also support the channel through Buy Me a Coffee, and your support will help bring more meaningful content like this. You'll find everything in the pinned comment.